Sarah Thompson and Emily Carter were just ordinary high school students, excelling in their classes and dreaming about the future until the person they trusted most, their English teacher, shattered their lives and exposed a darkness no one could have imagined. At first glance, she seemed like the kind of teacher everyone admired. From the moment she walked into her classroom, she carried herself with a confidence and warmth that drew people in. Students found her approachable and engaging, and parents trusted her implicitly. She had a way of making even the most difficult subjects seem interesting, using stories, real-life examples, and creative exercises that kept her students engaged. On school mornings, her classroom was often filled with laughter and conversation, a rare atmosphere in the otherwise structured and serious environment of the high school. Her lesson plans were meticulous, her grading fair, and she had an uncanny ability to remember small details about each student, from birthdays to personal hobbies. It was clear she cared about her students' success, and that made it easy for everyone to believe in her integrity. Over time, she became more than just a teacher. She was a mentor, someone students turned to for advice on school work, college applications, and even personal matters. She hosted study groups after school and stayed late to help struggling students. Her dedication was praised at staff meetings, and she won several awards for her teaching excellence. Parents were impressed by her willingness to communicate and involve them in their children's progress. She appeared perfect on paper and in person, the kind of teacher communities hoped for and rarely questioned. But beneath the polished exterior, small inconsistencies began to emerge, subtle enough that most people overlooked them. There were students who started to feel uneasy around her, moments when her compliments seemed too personal, or when she insisted on extra one-on-one time without a clear educational purpose. These incidents were rare, isolated, and easily dismissed as misunderstandings or attention meant to motivate students. Teachers and staff, caught up in the daily routine of classes, sports, and meetings, rarely noticed the undercurrents building in her classroom. Still, some students remembered feeling a sense of discomfort they couldn't quite explain. They hesitated in her presence, avoided certain topics, and sometimes swapped stories with friends about experiences that didn't quite sit right with them. These whispers remained private, often spoken in hushed tones in hallways or online forums. The students' uncertainty reflected the complexity of the situation. They trusted her to be a guide, but their instincts told them something was off. Her charm, intelligence, and dedication created a nearly impenetrable facade. The community admired her, often defending her if doubts were mentioned. She was charismatic, persuasive, and careful in maintaining appearances. Teachers who worked alongside her respected her professionalism, and administrators praised her results, seeing nothing amiss. The contrast between her public persona and the private unease some students felt created a tension that went unnoticed, a hidden layer of worrying beneath the surface of normalcy. As the school year continued, the duality of her life, outwardly admired and inwardly troubling, set the stage for events that would shock the community. Those who had trusted her completely were unaware that behind her bright smile and encouraging words, secrets were quietly unfolding. The admiration she commanded made it almost impossible for anyone to imagine the darkness lurking beneath the surface, a darkness that would eventually emerge in a way no one could have predicted. It was a reminder that appearances, no matter how perfect, can sometimes conceal a reality far more disturbing than anyone would want to believe. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow moving at the edge of sight. At first, the whispers were soft, almost hesitant, passed between students in hallways or on social media threads that few adults noticed. A joke that seemed slightly off, a comment that lingered longer than it should have. These small signals began to accumulate, creating a subtle tension that only a few could sense. Some students shrugged them off, unsure if their feelings were valid, while others found themselves avoiding certain situations, reluctant to spend time alone in her classroom or during after-school programs she organized. The discomfort was growing, but it remained hidden beneath the ordinary rhythms of school life. The rumors gained strength as patterns emerged. Students noticed unusual behaviors, extra attention that felt invasive, private meetings that seemed unnecessary, and messages sent outside school hours that blurred the line between teacher and student. These moments were isolated enough to be dismissed as quirks or misunderstandings, yet frequent enough to create unease among those who experienced them firsthand. A few students confided in friends, sharing experiences they could barely articulate, describing moments when they felt manipulated or coerced, though they lacked the words to define what had happened. Their uncertainty made them cautious, hesitant to speak publicly, and fearful that their concerns would be dismissed. As the whispers spread, certain students began to withdraw. The change was subtle at first. A student who once participated actively in class now remained quiet, shoulders slumped, eyes avoiding contact. Another, who had always been confident and outgoing, grew reserved, hesitant to engage in group activities. Teachers and staff noticed these shifts but often attributed them to normal teenage behavior or stress from academics. No one yet connected the dots, and the students themselves struggled to understand the source of their anxiety. The situation took a more serious turn when the students became particularly affected. Their hesitation and fear became more pronounced. They avoided after-school programs, excused themselves from one-on-one opportunities, and carefully monitored their interactions with the teacher. Friends observed the changes and grew concerned, but the students were reluctant to speak, unsure who could be trusted or how to explain the situation. The tension in the school began to grow, though it remained largely invisible to adults, a hidden current beneath the seemingly normal routines of classes, assemblies, and extracurricular activities. Despite the growing unease, the teacher maintained her outward persona. She remained friendly, approachable, and highly respected. Her interactions with students continued to appear professional and supportive, reinforcing the disbelief among staff and parents that anything inappropriate could be happening. This contrast between appearance and reality made the situation more difficult to recognize and harder to confront. The subtle warning signs created a fragile web of suspicion and fear. Students knew something was wrong but struggled to define it. While those around them saw only normalcy, the tension built slowly, a quiet storm gathering momentum behind closed doors. Each day that passed, the unease deepened, setting the stage for the investigation that would eventually bring the truth to light. The rumors, initially easy to dismiss, were only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would reveal betrayals of trust, and the devastating impact on the lives of those who had once admired and respected a teacher they thought was beyond reproach. The first concrete step toward uncovering the truth began with an anonymous tip, a message sent to the school district that hinted at misconduct and urged authorities to investigate. At first, administrators were cautious, unsure whether the claims were credible. Rumors were common in a school environment, and distinguishing between gossip and fact required careful attention. Yet the specificity of the tip could not be ignored. It described particular incidents, names, and dates, giving enough detail to warrant a formal inquiry. The district immediately contacted local law enforcement and began a discreet internal investigation to protect the students while gathering evidence. Investigators approached the situation methodically. They interviewed students, teachers, and staff, asking questions designed to identify patterns without revealing the seriousness of the allegations too early. For students, the process was intimidating but necessary. They were encouraged to speak about any experiences that made them feel uncomfortable or unsafe, and slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. The investigators discovered recurring instances of private meetings outside class, unusual personal messages, and instances where boundaries had clearly been crossed. Each testimony added weight to the initial concerns, painting a picture of behavior that was deliberate and repeated. As the investigation progressed, digital evidence became a critical component. Messages exchanged between the teacher and students were reviewed, along with notes, emails, and other communications. What appeared harmless on the surface began to reveal a different story when examined in context. Patterns of manipulation emerged, showing an abuse of trust that had gone unnoticed by colleagues and parents alike. The teacher had carefully maintained a professional exterior while creating situations that allowed private and inappropriate interactions to occur. It became clear that the misconduct was not impulsive or accidental. It had been planned and concealed with a disturbing level of precision. The investigators also found that the teacher had exploited her position of authority by leveraging trust and credibility. She created an environment where students felt pressured to comply, confused about what was acceptable, and hesitant to report what was happening. This abuse of power explained why the behaviors had gone unnoticed for so long and why the students had struggled with fear and uncertainty. The investigation began to uncover just how strategic and calculated the manipulation had been, revealing a side of the teacher no one could have imagined from her public persona. As evidence mounted, the investigators prepared to confront the teacher. By this point, the case was strong enough that denial would be difficult to maintain. The combination of testimonies, digital records, and corroborating accounts painted a clear and undeniable picture of misconduct. The investigation had transformed from a rumor-driven inquiry into a structured and detailed examination of abuse, setting the stage for an inevitable confession. The quiet unease that had simmered in the school for months was now backed by proof, and the community's disbelief would soon be replaced by shock and outrage. The careful, step-by-step process of gathering evidence ensured that when the truth finally emerged, there could be no doubt about the scope and severity of what had occurred. The moment of confession arrived quietly, yet its impact would reverberate through the school and community for years. Confronted with the mounting evidence, the teacher initially tried to maintain composure, insisting that interactions had been innocent or misunderstood. But as investigators presented timelines, messages, and corroborating statements, it became impossible to sustain any pretense. Finally, under the weight of the proof, she admitted to the assault, confirming that two students had been victimized over a period of months. The admission was chilling in its brevity, yet devastating in its implications, leaving no room for doubt or denial. The reaction from those who learned of the confession was one of shock and disbelief. Colleagues who had admired her professionalism, parents who had trusted her implicitly, and students who had once seen her as a mentor struggled to reconcile the teacher they thought they knew with the reality of her actions. The betrayal cut deep, particularly because it came from someone entrusted with guiding and protecting young people. The community was forced to confront the unsettling truth that appearances could be deceiving and that someone outwardly respected could harbor a hidden darkness. The confession also revealed a disturbing level of planning and control. It was not the result of a fleeting lapse in judgment or a single moment of poor decision-making. Instead, investigators learned that she had carefully manipulated circumstances to create private moments with the students, maintained secrecy, and leveraged her position of authority to silence doubts and prevent disclosure. Each detail painted a picture of calculated deception, showing how trust had been systematically exploited. The extent of the manipulation made the assaults even more horrifying, demonstrating the depth of the betrayal and the lengths she went to conceal her actions. Authorities moved quickly to take action following the confession. The teacher was removed from her position immediately, and legal proceedings were initiated to hold her accountable. Simultaneously, efforts were made to protect and support the victims who had endured the trauma in silence for months. Counselors were brought in to help them process the abuse and cope with the emotional and psychological consequences. The community, too, needed reassurance as parents and students grappled with feelings of anger, fear, and disbelief. The scandal became a focal point for discussions about safety, trust, and accountability within the school system. The confession also sparked a broader reflection on the environment that allowed the misconduct to go undetected. Administrators, teachers, and parents began to examine the warning signs that had been overlooked, questioning how such behavior could have continued for so long without intervention. Policies regarding student safety, reporting mechanisms, and oversight were scrutinized with an emphasis on preventing similar abuse in the future. The case served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, the responsibility of adults to listen when students raise concerns, and the need for clear boundaries between authority figures and those under their care. While the immediate danger had ended, the confession left lasting scars. Trust had been shattered, and the school community faced the long process of healing. The revelation was both a conclusion and a beginning, a conclusion in exposing the truth and holding the teacher accountable, and a beginning in addressing the failures that allowed abuse to occur. The events underscored the fragility of trust, the hidden consequences of manipulation, and the profound impact of betrayal on young lives. It was a turning point, one that would shape the school and its community for years to come, leaving a lasting imprint on everyone affected by the scandal. The aftermath of the scandal was both immediate and long-lasting, touching every corner of the school and leaving the community in a state of shock. The teacher faced swift legal consequences, removed from her position and formally charged with crimes that carried serious penalties. Court proceedings followed, during which evidence and testimonies detailed the depth of her actions, and the victims' experiences were finally given a voice. The legal process was tense and emotional, not only for the victims but for parents, teachers, and classmates who struggled to process the betrayal. The courtroom became a stage for the painful truth, where the weight of trust broken and innocence lost was confronted openly. Within the school itself, changes were immediate. Administrators worked to restore a sense of safety and stability, bringing in counselors and mental health professionals to support students. Programs addressing trauma, boundaries, and consent were implemented, offering guidance to help young people cope with the emotional aftermath. Teachers received additional training on recognizing signs of misconduct and understanding the importance of clear professional boundaries. Policies were rewritten to create stronger oversight and prevent abuse from going unnoticed in the future. The school community had to adapt quickly, balancing the need for security with the ongoing challenge of maintaining a positive learning environment. The impact on the victims was profound. Even with counseling and support, the emotional scars lingered. Feelings of betrayal, fear, and mistrust were difficult to overcome, and the process of healing was slow and complex. Friends and family played a critical role in providing comfort, but the experience left a permanent mark on their sense of safety and their relationships with authority figures. The broader student body also felt the ripple effects as trust in teachers and administrators was shaken. Students who had once looked up to educators as role models now viewed interactions with more caution, wary of the hidden dangers that could exist behind a friendly face. The community as a whole had to confront uncomfortable questions. How could such misconduct go unnoticed for so long? Were there warning signs that had been ignored? How could trust be rebuilt after it had been shattered so completely? Parents, teachers, and administrators reflected on the systems in place and the gaps that had allowed abuse to occur. Meetings, forums, and discussions became part of the healing process as the community collectively sought understanding and resolution. The scandal became a catalyst for change, prompting a renewed focus on safety, accountability, and the protection of students. Even as the legal and administrative processes concluded, the memory of the events remained. The scandal became a reference point, a cautionary tale of trust betrayed and the consequences of hidden actions. It served as a reminder that vigilance is essential, that the voices of those who feel unsafe must be heard, and that appearances alone cannot guarantee integrity. While the immediate danger had ended, the lessons lingered, shaping policies, relationships, and awareness within the school and beyond. The community faced a long journey of recovery, one marked by reflection, education, and a commitment to ensuring that no student would have to endure such violations again. The story left a permanent imprint, both painful and instructive, on everyone touched by it.